Today on Spotlight Now, we focus in on local politics and catch up with a newly elected state representative.
Coco Iwamoto is here with us live, along with representatives from the Hawaii State Democrats and Republicans. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday. This is Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. And as we mentioned, we're going to be focusing in on local politics. We want to welcome in a newly elected state representative, Coco Iwamoto. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan Yunji, for having me.
Well, you haven't officially been sworn into office
Correct.
yet, but the work has already started. We were able to talk about some of the things that you're already working on. But before we get into that and dive into some of the issues, let's talk about what has been noted to be somewhat of a historic campaign, with you being able to upset and take out Speaker Scott Saiki in that district race in the Hawaii State House. Talk about how you did it. This was the third time around that you were facing off in a primary election. What were some of the lessons learned, and how were you able to find success this time around?
Right, thank you. So I've been campaigning in the Ala Moana Kaka'ako downtown district since 2020. So I've been building up that relationship with my neighbors and really listening to what their concerns and what their hopes for our district are. And being responsive to that. And in fact, a lot of my campaign strategy came from my neighbors. When they said, the Queen Street is so dangerous, so I made that into a mailer, and it really took off. And by the time the election came around this year, Speaker Saiki, along with Mayor Blangiardi, announced that they're going to repair Queen Street. They miraculously found the money and the will to start repaving it, which they announced the day before ballots arrived. And then they said that they would start the repairs the day after the ballots were counted. So it was very focused around that, and it was focused in response, I believe, to my campaign, my video that went viral, as well as a mailer. But again, that all came from neighbors who get to cross that street or walk along that street every day. So just listening was really, I think, the most effective campaign tool, making myself available to them and then listening.
3 cycles is a lot to go through, and this is a really unique district. Shoe leather won't necessarily do it because it is so many high rises. What kept you going, race after race, to know that this is something you really wanted?
Well, so the first time in 2020, when I got the results and I was so close, he is, again, the Speaker of the House. He, I think, outspent me maybe 4-1 or 3-1, and I think so. Yes, and he's in the news like every week, right? And so for me to do so well told me something's up. It told me that my neighbors don't feel like he's reaching out to them. And in fact, oftentimes the first question I ask my neighbors is, have you ever met our current representative? He's been there for like 26 years, and then 28 years, and then this last election, I would say he's been there for 30 years. Have you actually spoken to him one-on-one? And a lot of them said no, they hadn't. So I knew I was onto something. And so when I got that affirmation that I was onto something in the 2020 primary election results, I said, I have to keep going. Also, what I noticed was every issue I kind of elevated, suddenly the speaker took an interest in that issue. And things started happening. Like the very first, the biggest reason why I decided to run against Scott Saiki, and then I called up my friends at the legislature. I said, did you guys talk about this in caucus? Was this a group decision? And they said, no, it wasn't. He basically made this unilateral decision to set the course for the whole state. And I'm like, that's not right. That's not what representational democracy is about, and that's what made me decide to run. That I just didn't think that was fair to my district. That wasn't fair to the state, and it wasn't fair to all of the representatives who made so many sacrifices to earn that seat, to be elected to that seat, and then to have their voices completely silenced on this issue.
overall, it was a pretty quiet election, primary election, with not a lot of key races. And so this upset when really elevated your name and just this race in general. A lot of eyes were on it, so much so that we saw notable figures in the Democratic Party and in leadership positions take a stance and take a side, sign waving with the speaker, including the mayor and the governor. Have you had any conversations with the mayor or the governor since you've been elected? And what was that like, knowing that you were going up against these powerful players?
Yeah, well, it did add to the PTSD of losing my first two, elections against the speaker. So going into third election, I was very unsure of how it might turn out, especially as you mentioned, with so many establishment politicians siding with the speaker. But I understand why they might do that. They share a lot of the same donors. A lot of this, they represent a lot of the same moneyed special interests. And so there's a lot of people who invested in maintaining the status quo. And a shakeup could shake things up in so many different directions. Ideally, I do want to inspire other people to run for office, even if it's against somebody who's been there for decades, to make sure that they stay in touch with their neighbors and make sure they elevate their neighbors' concerns and go for it and don't give up. That's the main, for me, that's what this was all about. It was an important lesson to demonstrate for my daughter, for other young people who want to make change in society and help out in this way, to just not give up, just keep pursuing it.
How do you think we should look at your victory in the larger political context? We saw not only your victory, but we also saw Ikaika Hussey win against May Mizuno. Now, she was appointed to this seat to replace her husband, but the Mizuno name in that particular district has to be pretty powerful. So, taking his win into account, taking your win, do you think that this sort of puts more establishment candidates on notice?
Right, and I also want to shout out to Ben Schaefer, right, running against Clayton He, who's a long-time, politician, and he did very well. And then, so yes, I think it is. Well, the media has done such a great job covering all of the issues of just the overall general climate of corruption, of pay-to-play politics, and I think it's kind of awakened voters to say, you know what, maybe if we vote somebody new in, we can change that climate. Yeah, so that, and hopefully we will. Hopefully we'll proceed to move in that direction, move away from centering power at the legislature to just a part of the decision-making process where no one's left out and where people have to collaborate and determine, well, where is the majority of the legislators on this issue, and let that move us forward.
Well, with this victory, of course, obviously means there will be a new speaker in the Hawaii House moving into this next legislative session. You beating Speaker Saiki doesn't necessarily make you the speaker,
That's right.
but wanted to get your thoughts on who you think should lead the House moving forward, and if those conversations have already been happening, and if you've been approached to endorse or support any one particular person.
Yes, I've not been approached directly. And possibly not even indirectly. I mean, I read the same news articles that I'm sure many people are, so there are some names already in print, but I haven't spoken to them beyond a mere at the Unity Breakfast saying, I look forward to working with you. However, I hope whoever is the new speaker and whoever's in leadership positions, they do take note of what I explained earlier, which is this move towards good government reforms, creating a climate that, again, distributes power is really important. So that person's going to be courageous. They're not going to lead through fear and insecurity. They're going to be visionary in terms of and they're also going to be, they're going to appreciate the diversity of the legislative bodies, right? They're going to say that we have all of these great people with experience from all across the state. Let's make sure we include everyone. No one feels alienated or left out. So that person, and I'm hoping, with me busting through this ceiling, I hope the next speaker is a woman, since we've never had a female speaker of the House before. I would be so, as a trans woman, I'd be so happy to provide that allyship to the next Speaker of the House.
You know, you mentioned street safety on Queen Street. When you look at the district, you also had the tragic death of that young woman who died right in front of McKinley High School.
Yes.
And anyone who, you know, walks through that area knows there's also that Kaka'ako playground, and those Kaka'ako moms were so instrumental in organizing to get that crosswalk there. So it does seem like pedestrian safety is a big issue for your district. You know, in addition to that, what do you think are the major things that you want to take on that you can actually influence tangible results for?
Right, and just to be clear, the work hasn't been finished. So you mentioned the crosswalk leading to and from Kolowalu Park. That's not completed. That still needs to be done. And then in terms of the street safety around McKinley High School, there's still additional safeguards that we can implement. And I look forward to working with both Sarah's mom, Chevy, as well as the Ward Village moms, Karen Chung. Other issues, and so one of the things I hope to do, because the capital's in the middle of my district, to make at least my office the people's house in terms of allowing different groups to use the desk and the phone line in my office, and where they can make calls to other state agencies or city and county offices to find out, hey, where's the lights for this crosswalk? You know, where they can participate in following up on projects that they were promised would be completed. So they could be part of this team moving forward. But other issues would be, obviously, condo owners represent more than 50% of my district, and they have a lot of concerns about insurance, about huge assessments, monthly maintenance fees going up. And we also have a lot of elderly kupuna who are on retirement incomes who no longer find Kaka'ako affordable. So are we just going to let them disappear out of Kaka'ako, or are we going to make sure that rents are affordable to them on their income?
One of the things that also happens each legislative session is an opportunity for representatives to be assigned committees, to take on leadership roles within committee assignments. And oftentimes it goes based upon, again, who is the speaker, alliances, and promises that were made. Again, with a new speaker, all of that will change. But if given the opportunity, what committees would you like to be a part of? Maybe even see an opportunity to be a leader on a specific subject matter committee, and why would you want to work with some of these more specific committee assignments?
Right. Well, I think it's customary that most freshmen end up on finance, at least in the state house. So I imagine that would be a given, especially given I have 5 years on the Board of Education where we had a very detailed budget. And then given my particular family's economic status, I know where all the tax loopholes are. And if we're going to close those tax loopholes, isn't it good to know that somebody out there knows where the tax loopholes are? And so we need to, with the tax cuts that happened last session, we're going to really need to find other ways to raise revenue. So hopefully we'll pass an empty home surcharge to collect some of that tax revenue, and that would be mostly from out-of-state investors. But in terms of so that would be finance. In terms of other committees, hey, I'll go where I'm needed, I think I bring a lot of skill sets and insight. And I know other people have very specific committees they want to be on. I'm pretty comfortable. I'd be happy to see where I'm needed, and go there. Also, if we have these good government reforms, if we have rule changes that allow for more diverse views on committees, and we kind of limit the unilateral power of the chairs of committees, that to me will open up more dialogue that we can have with each other. So even though I'm not on a particular committee, I can still talk with my colleagues who are on that committee. I mean, this is the kind of collaboration I think would serve Hawaii very well.
What you're talking about is really subverting a lot of norms, political norms right now. Do you think that those changes that you're proposing will be welcomed?
Well, right now, I mean, there's only a few people who benefit from the status quo. Think about it. Only a very few people are collecting all of this campaign contributions, right? And some of them even have $1 million in their campaign account. So I think it's about saying, you know what, is that fair that only one or two people in each chamber are raking in all of this? And especially because we're looking at it as pay-to-play politics, right? To me, it's evidence of that. If the business community, if large donors think, oh, we have to throw money at this one person, it's because they have all this unilateral power. So it's, I think it's until we start seeing that not look so concentrated, then we'll be assured that we actually have true democracy here in Hawaii. And I think people want that. And I think most importantly, we need to make sure that voters hold your electeds accountable to say, hey, did you vote for leadership that's going to maintain the status quo, or did you vote for leadership who's going to change some of these House and Senate rules? Like, so the voters need to hold their elected representatives and senators accountable for who they elect as their leaders.
Beyond just some of the issues that are impacting your district, you're also going to have a voice, of course, in things that are impacting the state as a whole. And one of the issues that comes up every single year is the legalization of recreational use of marijuana. We're
Right.
seeing what's happening across the country with this issue. This was an issue that, again, came up this last legislative session, but just didn't have enough of the political willpower to pass through this time around. What are your thoughts on this issue, knowing that it will likely come up again this session?
Well, and I think the reason why it's such a pressing issue is because the feds are beginning. They've already indicated that they're going to roll back the what category of offensiveness marijuana is. So it'll become a lesser offense, a lesser harmful drug, and so. If the feds open this can of worms and we're not ready, you know what I mean? That's the worst case scenario. Because if they say, hey, it's all good, and then we're like, oh no, wait, we don't have a structure in place, that would be much harder to impose a structure after the fact. What we want to do is be ahead of this. And that would be the smart thing. We want to make sure that we're doing labeling correctly, because that's the biggest fear people have is the pot that they're using is going to be too powerful, and shouldn't it be like alcohol where we know there's like little wine coolers that are like maybe 3%, but then there's 100 proof bourbon. Like I think it makes sense to accurately label whatever this recreational thing is. Also, we have an opportunity to really uplift our food economy, our farmers. What if the first people who got the grow permits to grow recreational cannabis were farmers who were producing local produce for local consumption? And if we said, hey, you guys can get an extra 1/10 of an acre of land or something and grow and let those profits subsidize the very costly labor, land, water, all of those things are really expensive to grow food here. So if we allow them to use those profits to subsidize their farms where they can feed us, we'll have more food. And I think that would be the ticket.
I want to go back to it's two things that you said. One of this is this idea of having this desk, the people's desk in your
Yes.
office, which is a pretty exciting idea to be able to give people that kind of access. And then also about the power structures and the changes that you would hope to happen to some of the rules. I mean, do you see yourself as somewhat of a watchdog? I think that when you look at government in its current structure, it can feel intimidating for people. They don't necessarily know how to testify. They don't have time during the workday. That whole process seems fairly opaque. I'm interested to know on how you hope to make that accessible, while at the same time you are now part of the institution, so you don't necessarily want to totally turn it on its head. Or perhaps you do.
Well, I mean, when you run on a platform of reform, good government reforms, I think you owe it then to the people who voted for you on that basis to be a watchdog. But why can't we all be our own watchdogs? Like, why is it hard to lead a group of people without lying? Without saying one thing publicly and saying another thing privately? Why can't we do things in the most open and transparent way? Why can't we be consistent and inclusive? I don't know. Why is that so hard? Again, I served on the Board of Ed for 5 years, and we had the Sunshine Law apply to us. We had all of the state ethics laws applied to us, whereas the legislature is exempt from Sunshine and some of the ethics laws. That's a problem. It's possible to make decisions as a group and to do so with integrity and complying with all of the ethics laws, right? And so we have to finish the work of the Foley Commission to improve standards of conduct, or what I call the Anti-Corruption Commission. There are still so many proposals that were not implemented. The most impactful proposals that we need to change, and hopefully the next speaker will lead us all through that process.
We are almost out of time, but before we let you go, we did just want to give you an opportunity to maybe give a word of encouragement to those individuals who may be watching and thinking, maybe one day see myself running for office, with the low voter turnout, but also just not a lot of options with candidates overall and people running. What would your message be out there for anyone who wants to make a change?
Yeah, well, if you're interested in learning how to be a candidate, HAPA, which is the Hawaii Alliance for Progressive Action, they have they're a nonprofit, and they have a program called the Kuleana Academy. And actually, HAPA's having an event on the Saturday, September 14th at the Inspiration Hawaii Museum. Anyway, you can find out more about this program and meet alumni from this program at that event. So please look it up.
Okay, Kim Coco Iwamoto, Representative-elect for District 25. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll be right back. Stay with us. More Spotlight Now, right after this.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. We're continuing on in our conversation about local politics. And before we get to our next guest, we always want to encourage all of you watching to engage in our conversations. If you have questions or comments for our guests, please make sure to head over to Facebook and type in your questions into the comment section. You can also do so by scanning this QR code that you see at the bottom of your screen.
And we want to welcome in now Derek Turbin, who is the chair of the Hawaii State Democratic Party. Derek, thanks for being here.
Oh, great. Thanks for having me, Yunji.
So we just heard from Representative-elect Kim Coco Iwamoto. You know, as Ryan mentioned, not a lot of competitive races this cycle, but that one people pay particular attention to. Third time running and unseating the speaker is a pretty big deal. Tell us your thoughts on how that all turned out.
Yeah, well, you know, that's been a pretty close race the past 3 election cycles. You know, it's been decided by pretty tight margins, you know, 150 to 200 votes. I thought Representative-elect Kim Coco ran a really strong campaign, had a lot of energy on the ground, and, you know, tight margins, you run a strong campaign, that's essentially, I think, what brought her over the top.
Let's talk about the races overall. There seems to be a lack of options for many people, with not many options up and down from the ballot, with candidates seeking to maybe go against an incumbent in a seat or challenge anything. How do you, as a Democratic Party, try to encourage more people to engage in the process? Not necessarily voting wise, we'll get to that, but more on the engagement of seeking an opportunity to run for office.
Well, you know, I think if you look at a lot of the seats with an open seats, such as like District 20, you had a lot of strong candidates stepping up. So, you know, in the scenarios where lawmakers were retiring, seats were opening up, you did see a lot of really strong candidates step in. You know, at the same time, you want to just always have more participation. So I'm doing a lot of outreach to young voters. You know, I'm showing up to some high school campuses. I'll be at Mililani's campus in a few weeks. Also showing up to University of Hawaii campus, not just here on Oahu, but the neighbor islands, and get young voters excited. I think one of the things I'm really excited about is the presidential campaign with Kamala Harris running now. She's really energized a lot of young voters. So I think that's going to uplift a lot of young voters, get people excited and engaged in politics, and just, in general, increase participation 2, 4, 6 years down the road.
Okay, speaking of Kamala Harris, we know that you had an opportunity to go to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Give us your review. How was it? It must have been a pretty crazy few days.
Oh, it was probably the least I've slept over a 4 to 5 day period, but it was so exciting. It was just incredible. You know, I'm a political junkie, so I got to meet a lot of like my political idols. On Tuesday, I put together a breakfast, and we had Gretchen Whitmer, the governor from Michigan, show up. She spoke, really energized us, got us pumped. Also saw Jamie Raskin, Representative Raskin from Maryland. He showed up and spoke, and just it was energizing, it was inspiring. I thought the energy in the arena was great. You know, the convention took place in the United Center basketball arena where the Bulls play, and I've been to some exciting basketball games where you just feel the arena bubbling with excitement, and that's how it felt all 4 days, with like the speakers at the end of the day, Kamala Harris accepting the nomination on Thursday. It was just, the noise was deafening, the energy was just incredible. One just moment that I'll also bring up that really stood out was Monday night. It was essentially President Biden's step down, almost, retirement speech from politics after he finishes his term as president. And that was incredibly touching. There was a 4-minute standing ovation of like, thank you, Joe. And just to see how kind he is, how much passion he has for the American people, that was really special for me.
What other things happen at the convention outside that people may not see on television? Because there were other panel discussions, there are other things that happen. It's an opportunity where the platforms can be further defined of the Democratic Party. Maybe share us with some things that happen that maybe we don't see on television that is covered by the media.
Yeah. So, we would have our breakfasts where we'd all convene at 7 a.m., hand out our delegate passes to the different members of the Hawaii delegation. Then we'd have some speakers to just get to know the Hawaii delegation, energize us, get us excited. Then we had our caucus meetings. I had the pleasure of attending some AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander caucus meetings, where we talked about some issues in the AAPI community. I attended the LGBTQ plus caucus meetings too, and that was really exciting. You get to see some of the democratic policies and platforms formed at those policy meetings.
You know, we know pretty much that Hawaii will vote for, for Harris, that those electoral votes are going her way. What does your party do now with all the energy that you're describing? If you don't necessarily need to influence the votes in the same way in a battleground state, we're not in Pennsylvania, let's put it that way. So what do you do with all that energy? Are you trying to outreach to other states or influence other voters?
Absolutely. Well, you don't want to take anything for granted. We absolutely are going to campaign here in Hawaii and do everything we can to ensure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz get our 4 electoral votes. We'll be on the ground, knocking on doors for some of our state house and Senate candidates, but also knocking on doors for Kamala Harris. We're going to be having events here for Kamala Harris, bringing out young voters. We've already had a Woman for Harris event. AAPI voters for Harris. We recently had a Filipino voters for Harris. So we're going to be having events here rallying voters for Harris, and we definitely don't want to take anything for granted here. At the same time, we're going to be also working with swing states. This past Saturday, we had a Hawaii for Harris phone banking to Nevada. Nevada's our closest swing state. So we're going to be helping out in the swing states such as Nevada, Arizona, even Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Also, early October, I've shared this with a lot of Democratic Party members, we'll be bringing a small delegation or any volunteers who want to come help out, and we're going to be bringing them to Nevada to knock on doors for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and do what we can to help with that swing state.
Makes sense. It's the 9th island,
It's
so
the
maybe
9th
Hawaii
island,
will have some influence.
Well, let's talk about, just as I mentioned, the voter turnout as a whole. Just there doesn't seem to be a lot of enthusiasm. Elected officials and Office of Elections have made it as easy as possible. We were able to mail in their votes, but still we're seeing just not a lot of engagement, not a lot of people actually showing up and casting their vote. Is that concerning at all to you as a chair? And as you head into this general election, how do you anticipate the results of the overall turnout to be?
I think if you look between the margins, you look between the lines, we had a really good turnout in contested races in the primary. You looked at Representative-elect Coco Iwamoto's race running against Speaker Saiki. There was high turnout in that race. Turnout was up from the last election cycle. District 20, the seat where Bert Kobayashi stepped down, where Tina Grandinetti won. Again, really high turnout. Senate District 23 with Ben Schaefer winning, turnout was up. So when you had those contested races, turnout was up. I understand that if you look at across the state, it looked like it was down, but in the districts that were contested where the state house candidates or the state senate candidates were on the ground campaigning, they did a great job of bringing turnout up. So, now the challenge falls on me and a lot of our state house and state senate candidates to get turnout up for the general election. And I truly believe with Kamala Harris on the top of the ballot and, a ton of really strong state house elects through the primary and state senate primary victors, we're going to get high turnout in the general election. So really to answer your question, when you looked at the contested state house and state senate districts, we had pretty strong turnout.
Let's talk about, I want to ask you the same kind of question that I asked Coco Iwamoto, and that is, looking at her race, looking at the Mizuno Hussey race, looking at the Schaefer-He race. These are, more progressive candidates that are going against more establishment candidates. How do you, as the party chair, sort of read what's happening? Are these bellwethers for more progressive politics coming into the state, or are these one-offs?
I don't like categorizing lawmakers as progressive, centrists, moderates. I think a lot of our lawmakers across state have really strong progressive values for some issues and maybe some more centrist values for other issues. The one thing I'll say is I take tremendous pride in leading the Democratic Party and having it as a big tent party. We welcome all ideas, a diversity of opinions. And we have spirited discussions at our Democratic Party meetings, and, you see it at the legislature, but we welcome all perspectives in the Democratic Party. So I think for the most part, what this year represented, what the primary represented, is just how diverse our opinions are in the Democratic Party. And now we just have a strong, wide array of lawmakers with a wide array of perspectives that are going to be moving on to the general election.
What we're seeing on the national level is sort of this changing of the guards, where many of the established politicians and Democrats who have led this party, like President Biden, are handing it down to a younger generation. And we're seeing some of these other governors and these up-and-coming young political minds within the Democratic Party really started to take prominence. Here in Hawaii, we are somewhat still seeing some of the same players, especially in our congressional delegation, and we have other members within elected office that have been around for a while. What is some of the efforts being made to extend that pipeline to a younger voice, a younger generation, and how would you describe where things are at right now between the balance of old and new?
Well, I think we saw in the Democratic primary some young, up-and-coming lawmakers advance through the primary. So that's exciting to me, to see some young lawmakers join the House of Representatives and join the state Senate. And, I'll kind of say that also at the Democratic National Convention, you really saw this strong appeal to young voters. There was a whole section at the DNC, like towards the front, really good floor seats where they're bringing in some young, like, TikTokers and Instagrammers, young influencers. You looked at a roll call on Tuesday night, and you had like Lil Jon come out, and just this like amazing energy. So I think it's incredibly important to bring in young voters, young perspectives, have that outreach to young voters. We saw it at the DNC, and we're taking a similar model here in Hawaii. We're trying to appeal to the young voters, get them excited about politics, and through that excitement, as I said earlier, in 2, 4, 6 years, they're going to run. I know we have one young man who made it through the primary, who's 19. Alex Ozawa is advanced through the Democratic primary, and he's young, he's energized, and he's going to bring some young energy to the general election race too.
I want to ask you, we are going to be hearing from someone in leadership at the Hawaii Republican Party in our next segment. We obviously, as a state, lean heavily on the Democrat side. There are some folks who feel like there should be more balance, especially in the legislature, that more balance leads to perhaps better outcomes. Obviously, in your role, you don't want more Republicans to be elected, but what are your thoughts about, just how lopsided that balance is?
Well, I think having a really strong Democratic presence in the House of Representatives and in the state Senate has done a lot of incredible things for Hawaii. Like, one of the things that we're one of the first is to legalize reproductive rights for women. We're really strong on reproductive rights for women, which is an incredibly important health issue that we have a strong presence in here in Hawaii. So I think that's a wonderful thing. We're incredibly supportive of LGBTQ plus rights. We have expansive health care for almost all of our Hawaii residents. We've raised the minimum wage. We did a great job of raising the minimum wage. So having that strong Democratic presence in the House, the state Senate, and up to the governor's office is incredibly important in ensuring that we have democratic policies here in the state of Hawaii, which makes us a stronger state. Just speaking of, I just had a great talk with Nolan, the national committee man for the Republican Party, and there's so much we agree on too, which was really refreshing and a real positive experience for me, just sitting down and talking to him for the past 20, 30 minutes. But at the same time, I'm incredibly proud to come from a democratic state where we have strong democratic policies such as reproductive rights, healthcare, and LGBTQ plus rights.
All right. Well, unfortunately, our time is up, but we want to thank you for taking time to update us on all that's happening within the Democratic Party as we continue to move towards what could be a very historic general election, of course, with the presidential ticket, with a lot of people watching that race as well. We'll be right back with more Spotlight Hawaii. Spotlight Now, right after this.
What is Hawaii's soul?
It's the way we exist with all living things. The aina, the ocean, the sky, the kanaka, who originated from the islands.
And everyone who calls Hawaii home.
It's all of us living with island consciousness.
It's understanding that the past is in front of us so that everyone can follow the kupuna
that came before us.
It's our shared kuleana to take care of these islands.
And each other, because we belong to Hawaii.
We are Go Hawaii.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Welcome back to Spotlight Now, and we continue on in our conversation. We want to also now welcome in Nolan Chang, who is from the Hawaii Republican Party. Nolan, thanks so much for joining us and for joining us in this conversation.
My pleasure being here today. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Let's begin with some of the discussion points that we just talked about with Derek and the Democratic Party. Your thoughts overall on where the Republican Party is here in Hawaii. As Yanji mentioned, this is a very blue state, and sometimes the Republican Party severely outnumbered when it comes to races and seats in the House and the Senate. Your thoughts on the Republican Party as you try to make inroads in these elected offices?
Yeah, so I never look at it as us being the underdog. I don't look at us that way. My mission, our mission, is to make this state better, to give the state another perspective. We've seen what the Democratic Party has done. I have lived here all my life, and I'd like to ask a question to all the people viewing the show today who have lived here all their lives, right? Are you all better off today than you were 10, 20, 30 years ago? I used to be a Democrat, right? Born as a Democrat. But my eyes opened a number of years ago when Barack Obama, I actually voted for Barack Obama. But before his second term, I used to work in Palapa Naval Shipyard, as I mentioned to both of you earlier. During his second term, when he started to build or allow the Chinese to build their little fortress in the Spratly Islands of the South China Sea, it changed my perspective. And so using critical thinking, which I ask all your viewers out, listen to this show today, right? Be a critical thinker and think about what I'm telling you and use discernment. It changed my perspective on many things. And so being outnumbered by the Democrats is not an issue to me. But the mission of trying to make Hawaii better is, and again, think about that question I just asked everybody. Are you better off today than you were 20, 30 years ago? And I don't think we are.
Let me ask you, it's similar to what we talked about with Derek, the balance of power in the legislature all the way up to the fifth floor at the Capitol, leans heavily on the Democrats. What do you think is lost by not having a larger Republican presence in those conversations?
Well, definitely. Well, look at the policies that they've passed, right? I asked people in Hawaii, do you like the fact that, do you think there's more than one or two sexes? Do you think there's more than two sexes? I don't, right? There's only two. There's only two in this. I mean, you're either a man or you're a woman. Well, these are some of the policies that they've passed. What about boys playing women's sports? I asked the people out there, again, use your critical thinking skills, right? Is this something that you want? Or is this something that our so-called public servants think that they want for you? Look at our educational system. Decade after decade, we've been talking about improving it. But look at what they're teaching our children at the same time. Sex education at the elementary level, they're teaching them about oral sex and masturbation and things of these issues of this sort at that young age. I don't agree with their policies. And I heard about Coco. I respect Coco and Derek, but I'm just being honest. And so this is their perspective. These are their policies, their platform. It's not ours. It's not our beliefs. And there's a lot of people in Hawaii who feel the same way.
And so why don't you think that is translating in terms of seats? Because there are Republicans who are putting themselves out there and who are running for office, and yet it continues to swing heavily towards the Democratic voice, especially when you just look at our local legislative body with the amount of members in the House and in the Senate. There's only two Republicans. Noting everything that you say and these comments, why do you think this is not correlating into actual seats within these offices?
I think nationally and locally, the Republican Party needs to do a better job of marketing our platform, marketing our beliefs,
our philosophies. We haven't done a good job with that. I'll just be honest, right? And we're working at that. We are working at that. And so maybe the public isn't informed or aware of another train of thought or other policies out there, right? And maybe no one has really sat down with them to address those issues with them and for them to be calm enough and, again, using the critical skills, thinking skills to think about these things and issues. I think the mainstream media, right, doesn't really give us a lot of time to, and that's why I appreciate all of you having us on today. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, to give us this opportunity, seriously, because not too many other stations do. And so people, again, that's why I'm asking your viewers, right, to listen with an open mind and critical thinking skills, because it's much different than what they've been hearing from the Democratic Party and from the mainstream media. So we need to be, again, I'll say it again, we need to do a better job of marketing ourselves and letting people know what we stand for.
Tell me a little bit about what those conversations are like when you're trying to recruit candidates to run, knowing what they're up against. I would think that it has to be pretty tough. We start to see the same names from the Republican side cycle after cycle. And, you know, I was just reading this morning in Civil Beat, which is a partner of Hawaii News Now. It said this month's Hawaii primary attracted the fewest candidates in a decade. The general election ballot will be even lonelier. So how do you talk people into running knowing what they are up against when they have an R next to their name?
Well, look at all the, again, I'll go back to the policies, right? And what we believe. Pro-life is a big one. Election integrity is another huge issue. And I mean, it comes down to integrity and your belief system. I think a lot of people do have the same beliefs we do. Maybe they're afraid to admit that they're Republican, and maybe they're afraid to be an outsider because they know that they're outnumbered by the Democrats. In the workplace.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, do you think in Hawaii there is social pressure to be of one political party or another?
Definitely. If you're a businessman and you admit that you're a Republican, well, maybe you're not going to get business from the Democrats. I'll be honest, right? I mean, try and ask some of the businessmen. I've talked to them. That's a definite concern. And so, yeah, we have a lot of obstacles in our way, but I'm not afraid. My mission is to make this state better. I've lived here all my life, and nobody's going to run me out of this state. Nobody. You know about the 30,000 people that have gone already, right, to the 9th island in Nevada. In fact, tell you a quick story. So I travel, as I mentioned earlier before the show, my wife and I travel extensively. We were in Texas a few days ago, right? We were in Texas for 3 weeks. And so at the hotel we were staying at, a lady had a Hawaii cup. And she was the one that put together the continental breakfast every morning. So I asked her, hey, how you doing? Are you from Hawaii? Oh, yeah. So we introduced ourselves, we start talking story. So then she says, okay, the next question. So where did you live? Yeah. How long have you lived here in Texas? 10 years. Is your whole family here? All of her children live in Texas and her grandchildren. Next question, right? Well, why? Why did you move 10 years ago? Because we couldn't afford it. We got priced out of paradise. Next question. So would you like to come back? Oh, of course. This is our state. This is our home, right? Of course, we want to come back, but we can't afford it. So I'm getting a little emotional here, right? This is why we fight. This is why we're doing. I don't care what the numbers are. I don't care. I'll keep fighting. This is our mission, to make Hawaii better, and not see our people go to move to the mainland. And we talked about the drain brain 20-something years ago, right? All the young people had to go to the mainland to find better paying jobs. Why is that? And has that changed? So I ask all your viewers that again. Use your critical thinking skills. Nothing has changed. It's only gotten worse.
It's hard not to talk about the Republican Party here locally without looking at the national level, of course. And your candidate, who is, of course, seeking re-election, is President Trump, with him at the top of the ticket. How do you think that will impact things here locally, with having a figure that is so polarizing as the former president? Do you think that actually helps encourage or motivate people here locally, or do you think that it could harm the Republican Party here locally?
You see me smiling, right, when you use the word polarizing, and so I know exactly what you mean. Personally, when I first saw him smashing the scene, 2016, around that time frame, 2015, I loved him. I used to work in Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. I'm a blue-collar guy, right? And I like his message. I like his tone of voice. I like his brashness, his aggressiveness. And then you have to look at his platform, what he did in 4 years. And all the people watching this show, you have to ask yourself, in the last 4 years, are you better off than you were during the previous 4 years? Again, using your critical thinking skills and discernment, ask yourself that question. And so I know what he can do for our country because he's done it before. And if he comes back again, he's going to do even better. So all of you people, keep an open mind and look at your pocketbook, right? Look at your pocketbook. Never mind about signal and the noise. The way he talks, the way he speaks, his tweets, whatever. You don't like that, that's one thing. But look at what he's going to do and can do for our country and our state. That's the bottom line.
Let's hear a little bit about your experience in Milwaukee. We did ask Derek about what it was like in Chicago. Tell us a little bit about what it was like to attend the RNC.
Yeah, so again, very energizing on everything Derek said. I did everything he said. Also heart-wrenching because when the 13 families, they call them the Gold Star families, these are the families where they had their children, right, killed during from the draw out from Afghanistan. So each one of them came up and gave their story. And also, more importantly, how President Trump, who isn't even the president now, took the time out of his busy schedule and all of his rallies, right, to console them, spend time with them, and to tell them how important their son or daughter was in, serving our country. That, again, man, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. That was heart-wrenching to me, right, that he would do that.
And also being in that room,
And
I would
that
imagine, 2 days, 48 hours after he had an attempt on his life, that had to be, a very somber, experience, but also, very energizing for the base to see him healthy and vibrant at that convention.
And his courage, right? Being unafraid, again, to be out in the public, knowing that anything could happen. And how close he almost lost his life. And so that courage, the resolve, his boldness, again, that's who he is, right? And a great leader. Because how many other people could have easily said, you know what, I don't want any part of this already. I'm stepping out. He never did. He never flinched. In fact, you saw what happened after he got shot. He starts pumping his fist and talking, fight, fight, fight. And so, again, just very inspiring to see him. And when he spoke, he wasn't his normal self. I don't know if you all watched his speech. He wasn't his normal self. It was more reserved. But to me, he was more introspective about everything that's happening in his life and our country. But still, you have that same fight, the same resolve, the same positive attitude and will to make our country better. And so I love the guy. I think that the people in Hawaii need to understand and, again, use their critical thinking skills and look at a boy, right? Beijing Biden, look at what he did or what he didn't do, and Kamala Harris is no different. I'll be honest with you. She's no different.
Let's take a look back here locally. What specific races are you folks looking at and hoping that the Republican Party could pull off with a win in the House or the Senate? Is there any specific races that you guys are keeping a close eye on?
I'm looking at the Senate. I'm looking at the U.S. Senate. And Mazie Hirono versus Bob McDermott. There's a lot of things I could tell you I want to say, but I'm going to reserve my comment. And in fact, I have a shout out to Hawaii News Now. If you'd be willing to ask Mazie Hirono if she'd like to debate Bob McDermott. I think the people would love to see something like that. And we talked about that earlier, about how that may work out. But if you guys could agree with that and you could extend an invitation to her, I think that'd be wonderful. The people of Hawaii deserve to hear what she has to say and what he has to say, to hear the two perspectives. And going back to what you said about our legislature and the imbalance between the Democrats and the Republicans, it's the same thing. I mean, we have to earn everybody's trust. Vote people in who you think can do the job and can do things for the state. But we'd like to have that balance, the check and balance, right? That's what our country is all about, or supposed to be.
We are
almost... But that one race, man, that would be wonderful if we could have a debate between the two of them. I'll be there an hour before that debate, right here watching it myself.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you about the outreach that you are going to be doing in the lead up to the election locally. How are you going to energize voters on the Republican side to get out for Trump and for Bob McDermott and other candidates who are on your party side?
Yes, ma'am. And so, we need to do, again, I'm honest. We need to do a better job marketing ourselves. We need to do a better job energizing the grassroots. We're not where we want to be. We know where we want to be, but we're not there yet. As a party, we're still building our foundation. At the same time, we have this huge election in front of us, right? This huge election. And so it's just getting more people to help our candidates and really pounding the grassroots, talking to the people in our communities, talking to the people in our districts and our precincts, and trying to get them to understand, right, how important, how consequential this election is, and that we need their support.
All right. Well, Nolan Chan, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us about all the things happening on the Republican Party side here in Hawaii. And good luck to you and the rest of the Republican Party in this upcoming election. We'll be right back with just some closing thoughts. Stay with us.
Aloha.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
What an interesting conversation we had today on Locals Politics. We, of course, began our conversation speaking with Representative like Kim Coco Iwamoto. You get a really strong sense from her that she is someone who is determined to really interrupt the status quo with a number of options and thoughts and processes and plans that she's hoping to implement.
Yeah, interesting to hear just some of her practical plans. The idea that she would have a desk in her office dedicated to the people so that she can connect them with the people that are making decisions and following up on promises made. And also, you know, wanting more transparency, more sunshine laws, perhaps more restrictions on fundraising. Some of the suggestions that were made after some of the corruption that was revealed in past sessions. Now, you know, she wants to hold folks to task. We'll see how she's received. I mean, right now, obviously very high off of winning that race, but it is, you know, there are quite a few members and a lot of other people that she's going to have to work with.
Yeah, and including, you know, potentially the governor and the fifth floor who actively campaigned for Speaker Scott Saiki. So a lot to keep an eye on during this interim session as the chess pieces begin to assemble to see what the new legislative body looks like for the Hawaii State House. We also were able to catch up, of course, with the two leaders from both the Democratic and Republican side of the parties here in Hawaii. We started off our conversation with Derek Turbin, getting an update with him. Also someone who else is very energized coming off of that DNC in Chicago. He talked about some of the things, the highlights for him, but also noted that there are a number of young Democrats that he is hopeful will help to continue on in the party's legacy.
Yeah, and interesting to hear the party's strategy when it comes to influencing the presidential race. Most political analysts will tell you that those 4 electoral votes from Hawaii will most likely go to Harris and Walz. So in the meantime, you hear the DNC locally saying that they're going to do outreach in specific places, the closest being Nevada, which makes a lot of sense given all the Hawaii ties there. On the other side, we did hear from Nolan Chang from the Hawaii State Republican Party, really making a strong pitch for people to consider his party and that nominee, saying that they need to perhaps look beyond the personality and focus more on the policies that would come to pass if they were elected.
Yeah, and hearing from him saying that, asking and encouraging voters to just look at their own lives and see how things might be different if things have changed for voters. And I think this is something that we are hearing on a national level as well. The Republican Party really just trying to make a case saying that things obviously for a lot of people in this country much tougher than they were maybe 4 years ago. All right, we are looking forward to our next conversation next week, Tuesday.
That's right. We are focusing on Hawaii Island with the police chief there, Ben Moskowitz, along with John DeFries, who's the head of the Mauna Kea Authority, find out what's happening on top of the mountain. Right now, in reference to that, we leave you with a shot of beautiful Hilo Bay.